Hi, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Profiles in Canada, the Scouts Canada web series where we connect with Canadians who use their talents to the full for the greater good. I'm Kaelem, and today we are here with the Honourable Perrin Beatty, a guest whose resume is longer than the time we have together, but here are the highlights. In 1979, Minister Beatty was made the Minister of State of the Treasury Board, at the time the youngest cabinet minister in Canadian history. After that, Minister Beatty held several other cabinet roles, defense, health, briefly foreign affairs. And while usually we mention some scout groups in our guest constituency, his was so geographically large in Wellington Grey, Dufferin, Simcoe, I'll settle for mentioning his many scouting constituents within the Shining Water Council. And of course, Minister Beatty was once a Cub Scout himself. After politics, Minister Beatty was the CEO of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the CBC, which worries me only because it means I better do a good job of interviewing him. Most recently, Minister Beatty was president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, more on that later, and sat on the COVID-19 Supply Council, which ensured that Canada had what it needed to weather the COVID-19 pandemic. Minister Beatty, thank you so much for joining us today. What a pleasure.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
I'll ask the first question. It's been an undercurrent of our series to talk about what Canada means for each of our guests. And so I wonder, Minister Beatty, who you've held so many different portfolios around Canadian government, what does Canada mean for you?
For me, more than anything else, it means the respect we have for one another, for diverse opinions, for the needs of others, the willingness to compromise. Canada was born in compromise. If it hadn't been for the willingness of the delegates who came to the Charlottetown Conference in 1864 to set aside their personal preferences and to find common ground, Canada would never have existed.
Hmm.
So it's that sense of willingness that we have to respect each other and to build something together, and also the optimism for the future. When you look at how the odds were stacked against the colonies that came together in 1867, they seemed insuperable, including the potential for absorption into the United States. And yet, the very young nation was able to build out across a continent and to build something that's the envy of the rest of the world.
Wow. You were a cabinet minister under three different prime ministers. I wonder, Minister, was there anything about being a cabinet minister that surprised you, that you didn't expect going into the role?
I think there are many surprises, and what you find in being in cabinet is you get exposed to the country as a whole, and you discover all sorts of elements of it you weren't aware of, and often you're faced with challenges you never anticipated you were going to have. I held seven different portfolios, and that meant that it was always a matter of learning something new, facing new challenges, stretching yourself, and trying to do a good job no matter where you were. The greatest shock that I had, though, frankly, was when I first was elected to Parliament. I was 22 at the time. I had been born in Southern Ontario. I grew up there. I went to grade school and high school there. I went to university there. I was elected from a Southern Ontario constituency, and I thought I had a very good understanding of what Canada was all about. It was attending my first caucus meeting where you had people from all over the country there, that you discovered that somebody from Newfoundland or from British Columbia or from Quebec or Alberta or other provinces or the territories could have a very different view of what Canada was than your view, but be every bit as fervent a Canadian as you were. And it was shocking to me because it's easy for those of us from Southern Ontario to grow up largely unaware of the diversity of our country, of how rich it is because of its differences, and about the fact that Canadians from very different backgrounds, different faiths, different regions of the country can be uh, tremendously diverse in their views and in their experience, but still be ardent Canadians at the same time. It's a remarkable revelation when you discover it.
So you were a cabinet minister, you were president of the CBC, president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, the COVID-19 Supply Council, and more. When you were growing up, did you ever imagine that this would be your legacy, what is left?
I was often asked when I was in Parliament to speak to high school groups who were
Mm.
doing career planning, and people would say, "How did you prepare for what you were doing?" And I would always remind them that John Lennon said that life was what happens when you're busy making plans. I was just extremely fortunate. I was fortunate to be born into what I believe is the greatest country on the face of the earth. I was very fortunate to have a good education. I was very fortunate to have the experiences that I had and to be in the right place at the right time. That was so much of it is serendipity. And I look back at my life and I think that I really don't know anybody who's been more fortunate than I have.
You were obviously, as we mentioned, the president of the CBC. Something that the CBC exists for is the promotion of Canadian content. I wonder if you might discuss what that means, and more importantly, perhaps, why is it so significant that the CBC promotes Canadian content?
It's important to go back to the early days of the CBC. It was created because as radio was first coming into to North America, it was down in the United States that you were just seeing the development of radio networks. And what you were seeing was that new Canadian radio stations were looking to affiliate with American networks and pump American stories, American songs, American news, American culture into Canada, and that Canadian stories would go untold. And so the government of the day felt that it was important, first of all, to have a device there that could take radio signals outside of just the big cities and extend them all the way throughout Canada. But secondly, to have a vehicle where we could tell Canadian stories to ourselves. And that mission is every bit as important today as it ever was. It's important that we ensure that Canadian history, Canadian stories, Canadian culture are present in Canadian homes right across the country. We should never be allowed to forget our history, our roots, who we are, what our culture is, and what we share in common with one another.
Promoting Canadian content, but in a particularly different way, is also the role of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I wonder if you might discuss what the Chamber of Commerce is so important for doing now, especially more than ever.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, it represents about 200,000 businesses across the country, every size, every sector, every region of the country. There are chambers no matter where you go in Canada. And their role is to come together to bring businesses of all sizes together to talk about how can we ensure that we have policies in place or that we take actions that make our economy stronger and create a better quality of life for Canadians. This is more important today than ever before. The competition between nations and between their businesses is more intense than ever before. It's tougher in many ways to start a business and to be successful than it's ever been. And the Canadian Chamber has an important role to play to ensure that the needs of Canadian businesses right across the country are met.
During the COVID pandemic, you sat on the COVID-19 Supply Council, as we mentioned, the body that made sure that Canada could weather that particular storm. You were also obviously a former health minister. I wonder why that role was so important for you, even after you'd long since left politics per se.
Well, when we have to think back to the beginning of the COVID pandemic, where we were dealing with something that we had never seen before in our lifetimes. It was a silent killer that had been devastating. We saw the effects in China and northern Italy and New York and elsewhere as it was, and we knew it was coming to Canada as well. We weren't entirely sure how it was caused. We weren't entirely sure how to prevent it. We weren't sure how long it would be with us, how deep it would be, what consequences it would have, both for our lives, but also for our economy as well. And so it was important that we bring together people from all walks of life, including from business, to talk about how do we ensure that we have the supplies that are necessary so that we can protect Canadians and allow them to resume their lives to the best of their ability, even in the face of this grave pandemic. So Anita Anand, who was the minister responsible for securing these supplies, created the COVID Supply Council and asked me to be a member of that. And I was delighted to be able to do that.
Right. The folks will remember, obviously, what it may have been like during that COVID pandemic, but you were able to see the back end of Canada's response to that crisis. I wonder if you might reflect on that. I wonder if you might talk about maybe why it was a benefit that Canada was able to act perhaps quickly by virtue maybe of us being Canada.
Well, the single most important thing is we were able to save lives.
Mm,
Um, I have just wintered in Florida. If you look at the mortality rate in Florida because of the policies that they followed, it's roughly twice of that of Canada per capita. If you look at 100 people, about twice as many people would have died within a sampling of 100 people in Florida as died in Canada.
mm.
And as a result, then Canada's measures, which could certainly have been improved, were better than they were in many other parts of the world. And we also were able to emerge ultimately from it by the fact that we came together and we said we wanted to support Canadians by giving them the supplies they need and ensuring they also had financial support,
Mhm.
both for individual families and also for Canadian businesses. Now, what we need to do is to go back without trying to assign blame and saying, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And how can we learn that we can do a better job in the future? The only thing that we're certain of is that there will be more pandemics in the future. We don't know what form they're going to take. It may be COVID, it may be something entirely different, but there are lessons to be learned here, and we should be taking those lessons and applying them whenever is necessary in the future to save lives and to ensure that Canadians can weather whatever storm comes at us as successfully as possible.
You said that a defining characteristic of our national history has been compromise. Maybe it's even a testament to that characteristic of ours that you were on a bipartisan, multifaceted, diverse COVID-19 Supply Council. I wonder if you might talk, Minister, about a lesson from our history that young people should know. Obviously, we have to be critical of our history, but is there something, a defining thread that makes us different from other nations?
Compromise. Go back to compromise. Without compromise, Canada never would have been created. And it's the glue that holds our country together. It's the inclination that the Canadians have, unlike in some other countries, to say, let's find common ground as opposed to each of us insisting that we must have our way to the exclusion of everybody else. That compromise has been critical to us for success ever since we first created Canada, and it's going to be essential in the future as well. It's finding common ground, it's respecting each other, it's recognizing the fact that what we have built here is precious and that it needs to be preserved.
Hmm. Well, Minister, just for one last question, thank you so much for being here with us. At the end of every interview, we ask our guest what advice they have for young Canadians today who look to make a positive difference in their communities and, of course, in our country. What advice would you have?
I think the first thing is that we all need to understand how fortunate we are to be Canadian.
Hmm.
It's too easy for us to take it for granted. Often, when you're born in an orchard, and all you have to do is to hold out your hand and an apple falls into it, you can assume that that's your birthright and that you can take it for granted. People from other countries know that that's not the case and that their democratic system, the prosperity that they have, their well-being, all depend upon their working at it, putting back into the system, trying to make things better. So that's the first thing. Recognize how fortunate we are that we can't take that for granted and make a commitment to making a difference. And the second is simply get involved.
Hmm.
There are thousands of different ways in which you can make a contribution. And what you'll find in every case is that when you volunteer and when you get engaged, you get far more out of it than you put in.
That is a great lesson from a former Cub Scout, I'd say, to the Cub Scouts of today. Thank you so much, Minister Beatty, for joining us on the show today. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
To everybody at home, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Profiles in Canada. And stay tuned because we are going to be back next week with another great Canadian who uses their talents to the fullest in the service of our country and, of course, of the common good. So I can't wait to see you then. Thanks so much for joining us.